When I was about 14, I used to babysit a few kids from families who knew my parents. There was this one kid named Mike who lived on my street. Mike was about 6 or 7 at the time, and his parents often went out with friends for meals to high-end restaurants and bars. I used to babysit Mike at least once a week, and the kid took a real liking to me, and he was never any trouble, so it used to be a lot of fun. Looking back, he was probably my most favorite kid to babysit. I learned that letting kids stay up a little past bedtime gave me some leverage to get them to behave and do as they're asked. I would always let Mike stay up a little past bedtime. We would play Plants vs. Zombies for hours and have Mario Kart contests. His dad was an avid gamer, so he had lots of different consoles all set up in a spare bedroom or man cave on the upper floor. We weren't allowed to play in there, so Mike's dad would set up some games downstairs for us. On this particular occasion, I arrived about 6 p.m., just as Mike's parents were due to leave. They gave me the same instructions they did every time. Keep the doors locked, help yourself to anything in the fridge, no liquor past 8, and in bed for 9. The liquor was a joke, but a joke they made every time. They'd ordered us a pizza, and once they left, we sat down straight away to start our gaming. After about an hour or so, the batteries in Mike's controller died. Mike mentioned his dad had a charger pack upstairs in his room and said his dad wouldn't get mad if we went in just to get it. Mike ran upstairs, and I went to get us some more sodas. As I was in the kitchen, I heard a loud bang and a scream. Mike came running down the stairs in a panic, shouting some gibberish saying someone else was in the house. He wasn't really making much sense, and so I had to calm him down in order to actually string a sentence together. Mike told me that he got the battery pack, and as he was walking out of the room, he heard a creak behind him. He turned around and couldn't really see anything, but as he turned to leave, he saw a shadow behind the curtains that was highlighted from the streetlights outside. I told him it was probably just a trick of the light and that I would go and check. I wasn't overly concerned, as I know how kids always think there's something under the bed or in their closet. Mike wasn't usually one of these kids, but I knew all the doors were locked and it was a safe neighborhood. Mike didn't want to be left alone, so he came upstairs with me and took me to where he saw the shadow. There was no one there. We checked the other rooms too, and nothing. We went back downstairs and continued to play games, when all of a sudden we heard a loud crash and what appeared to be footsteps moving around upstairs. Me and Mike looked at each other, showing fear in our eyes. I grabbed Mike's hand, dropped the controller, and ran out the front door. We went to the Winston's house next door and banged as loud as we could, screaming to call 911. We explained what happened, and despite Mrs. Winston's pleas, Mr. Winston grabbed a baseball bat and ran round to the house. Mr. Winston was a relatively stocky guy, and you could tell from his stature that he was definitely some kind of athlete or bodybuilder or something, especially in his younger days. Mr. Winston came back about 10 minutes later, just as the police were arriving. He told the police that he didn't find anyone inside, but he did notice the back door was wide open. I remember hearing the police saying it was likely that whoever it was long gone, but they would check everything just to make sure it was safe. About 20 minutes later, the police came out with a man in cuffs. Neither me or Mike recognized the man, and as it turns out, he opened the door as a decoy and went to hide in the basement. The weird thing is, there's no way this man could have gotten into the house when I was there, as I was always making sure everything's locked, which means he was already in the house. I never did find out why they believed him to be there, but I never babysat for Mike after that. To be honest, I never babysat anyone. It wasn't that I was scared, I just didn't want to be responsible for someone else's child if ever there was another break-in. Next time, we might not be so lucky, and I really didn't want that responsibility. When I was about 11, I lived with my mom and sister, who was a couple of years older than me. We didn't get along very well and would often fight, so my mom couldn't leave us alone if ever she went out. We'd recently moved to a new part of the city after my mom and dad broke up, and I made some friends quite easily. After living there for a few months, my new friends asked me if I wanted to go to a sleepover at some guy's house called Liam, who was a local support worker. They assured me he organized a lot of the local under-16s functions in the area, and they often went to stay and play games, and he was trusted by all their parents. I asked my mom, and being a good mom, she said she wanted to meet Liam first. He seemed pretty ordinary, well-dressed, polite, and a relatively good-looking guy. After meeting him, my mom said it was okay for me to go and stay with my friends, but told me to be back early the next day. There would usually be about 6 to 8 of us that would go together. We would all buy junk food and then play games and watch horror movies while slumming it on the living room floor. I went a few times with all my friends, and even though Liam was an adult, it was like being left unattended. He would just sit there and allow us to be boys and laugh when we would prank and scare each other. One day my mom was in need of a babysitter at the last minute and asked me if I would ask Liam if he was free and said she would pay him. I called him and he agreed and came to pick me up. He took the money my mom gave and bought us a pizza on the walk home. Everything was fine and there was never anything suspicious to report. Whenever my mom needed a babysitter, she asked me to ring Liam and he never said no. One cold winter evening, when playing out with my friends, Liam came round and asked if we all wanted to have a sleepover. We all said yes, and he told us to make sure we all asked our parents. He was always upfront about it, so there was never any reason for anyone to be suspicious. We all ran home, and those of us that were allowed came back with sleeping bags, pillows, and either food or money to buy food. As usual, we all stayed up watching horror movies, and when it got to about 2 a.m., Liam stated that we should all get some sleep. It was freezing cold that night, and Liam mentioned he had a new double bed and we could all sleep in it. About 4 or 5 of us, myself included, fought our way to have a spot on the bed. Once we were all settled, Liam came in and got into bed with us. It seemed a little strange, but I was in my sleeping bag, so felt pretty safe. Plus, we'd stayed many times before, so I didn't think anything of it. I'm not even sure most would know of the dangers at that age. On our way home the next day, we were all laughing and joking when a marked cop car pulled up next to us. "Are any of you named Jordan?" one of the officers asked. One of us was Jordan. It turns out Jordan didn't ask his mom if he could stay over, and she reported him to the police as missing. Jordan was taken in the police car, and as Liam was a legal adult, he was arrested on the spot for kidnapping or abduction or something. Liam was never charged, but we were all interviewed, and when we told the police and our parents about us all sharing the bed, it definitely raised more questions than it answered. We were all sat down and told how this type of behavior wasn't normal, and our parents were clearly concerned and felt guilty for allowing us to be in that position. I never stayed at Liam's again after that, and I heard several years later that he'd been locked up and put on some sort of register for being in a relationship with an underage girl. I don't know if that's true, but I can honestly say that it wouldn't surprise me. Janet lived across the street from where we lived. I was 16 at the time and would babysit for her regularly. She only moved in about 6 months ago, but made friends with my mom right away and asked if I would like to babysit every now and again. She was a single mom and had 2 girls, aged 3 and 5, who we'll call Becky and Lisa. They were the sweetest 2 girls and would giggle at everything and anything. When I would babysit, I would generally put the girls to bed at about 7 p.m., and then the rest of the night was my own. Free to watch movies and text boys, that sort of thing. Both the girls slept in the same room, and there was a camera set up so I could watch them on a baby monitor. There were other cameras set up as well that covered the rest of the house, inside and out. These were all linked to Janet's phone, and she had been very honest and upfront about them and said these weren't to spy on me, but for all our safety. I didn't mind and knew she would probably check on them every now and again, just to make sure everything was okay without having to disturb me. Janet was cool and would let me watch things I shouldn't without telling my parents. She would also make sure there was plenty of root beer and yummy convenience foods for me to indulge in once they were asleep. On this one particular night I was babysitting, Janet was working late and wouldn't be home until after midnight. I followed my usual routine and eventually fell asleep on the couch and was awoken to the house phone ringing. It was Janet. She was frantic and crying, saying she could see the silhouette of a man standing in the corner of the girl's bedroom. Without thought, I ran upstairs and ran straight into the bedroom, switched on the light, to find no one there. Janet was still on the phone. I told her there was no one there and even checked the closets and other rooms just to make sure. Janet appeared confused and said that no one left the bedroom as she was watching on the hall cameras and was convinced she saw someone in there. She settled down and said she would see if she could finish early and would be home as soon as she could. I told her not to rush and that everything was okay. I went back downstairs and helped myself to some pizza and rewound my movie to where I fell asleep. I continued to check the baby monitor frequently, and there was no movement of any kind. After about an hour or so, I heard crying from upstairs. I casually got up off the couch and walked up to the bedroom, thinking nothing of it, and flicked the light switch. Nothing but darkness. I got goosebumps as I entered the room, but didn't want to overthink it, as it was probably nothing. I went over to Becky, who was crying, and picked her up to comfort her. As I looked up, I noticed the closet door to be open slightly. I was certain I closed it earlier. I continued to look around the room while my eyes were still adjusting to the darkness, and then I saw the figure of a man standing in the corner of the room. He was dressed all in black with a hood up, so I could barely see his face, but I could see his eyes, and he was looking right at me. I froze. I didn't know what to do. We just stood there staring at each other for what seemed like an eternity. The man slowly started walking around the room, keeping eye contact with me. As he got closer to the door, he made a run for it downstairs and out the front door. I ran downstairs and locked the door and called my dad to come over. My dad stayed with me until Janet arrived home. Janet checked the footage with me, and my dad's still there. The man came out of the closet. I wasn't sure how this could happen, as I know I checked, and it was definitely empty. We all went upstairs to have a closer look, and found a trap door in the floor of the closet. Janet said she had never noticed it before, and I definitely didn't notice it. She had lived there for 6 months at this point, and was completely unaware of this door in the closet, and in her child's room no less. It was designed to be hidden, like a low-key panic room of some kind, so it kinda made sense that it had gone unnoticed. My dad climbed into the small space and said it was trashed, like someone had been living there. We don't know how he got in, or if it was possible to re-enter from the outside. Janet stayed with us that night with her kids, and the next day someone came to secure it. It was reported to the police, but we never found out who the man was. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing.